Today's show is sponsored by Vasion Print. Technology should drive your business, not slow it down. But legacy print systems are a resource suck. Don't waste time and money managing print when there's a solution. Vasion Print, formerly known as Printer Logic. Eliminate resource-intensive print servers and make the switch to an intuitive, cloud-native solution that makes printing effortless for IT teams and end users. Reduce attack surfaces and secure your environment while enjoying cloud-native flexibility that's easily supported in a hybrid workforce. It's not a patch or a fix. It's a truly seamless solution for print. See for yourself by scheduling a demo at vasion.com. That's VASION.com.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It is good to be back on a Wednesday show. It's good to be back. I know Aaron has been doing double duty for a lot of this year, and not out of anything else. He just decided he wanted to jump into more of the interviews, but I get a chance to get back on it. Excited to be back. Excited to be back with all of you. We are wrapping up August. September is right around the corner. My favorite time of the year. The weather cools off a little bit. Football comes in. The leaves change. But we've got a good one today. I don't know if any of you saw. I'll put a link in the show notes. There was a study that came out here just recently, decent-sized study, 150 companies, 300 plus executives or so. A little bit troubling information, basically saying that about 90% or so of CFOs are a little bit underwhelmed with their AI projects, at least from a financial perspective. They feel like maybe they're underperforming or they're costing too much. And so, we thought with that, it would be really important for us to make sure that we continue to, dig into, refine our skills, remind each other to be paying attention to what things cost, pay attention to what technology costs and how we're best utilizing the scarce resources that we all have in terms of, technology that's out there. So we get a fun chance today to dig into, with our friends from DoIT, to dig into FinOps, to dig into how we're best marrying the financial world as well as the technology world, how those teams are talking together, and how do we best put systems in place that give us not only just visibility and dashboards, but also things that are starting to become not only more proactive, both in terms of, asking it questions, but also in the engineering process, in the design process, in the evolution process. How do we make sure we've got the right tools in place, the tools that are giving us, again, not just dashboards, but letting us interact with what's next, with what's possible. And we get a chance to dig into that today with the good folks from DoIT. Really have a great guest, lots of interesting financial background, built some really interesting thing, and now starting to bring that to a broader perspective from a FinOps perspective. So, going to dig into some FinOps stuff. Excited about this one, and we're going to get to that right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by DoIT. Cloud spend is just the surface. What really matters is how it drives performance, reliability, and speed to market. DoIT Cloud Intelligence aligns every dollar to the intent of the workloads. DoIT is trusted by companies like Fiverr, HackerRank, Current, and Superbet. DoIT helps teams go beyond dashboards, surfacing hidden inefficiencies, resolving incidents faster, and aligning cloud operations with business priorities. One platform, unified signals, better outcomes across engineering and finance. Visit doit.com, that's DOIT.com, to unlock intent-aware FinOps at scale. DoIT Cloud Intelligence. And we're back. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we are going to dig into a topic that I know a lot of you are thinking about, and a lot of you are really kind of dealing with and struggling with right now, which is your cloud environments are growing. The demands that you're getting from upper management, from your business units are, we want more, we want to do it faster. And then the challenge is always, can we afford it? Can we do it affordably? Can we make sure that we're best utilizing our resources? And ultimately, all that falls under the umbrella that nowadays we call FinOps. And so today, really, really excited to have Amit Kinha, who is Field CTO at DoIT and also FinOps Foundation Board Member. Amit, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to be with you. Give us a little bit of your background, because as I mentioned, you're both involved with this from a board perspective, but you've got a ton of really interesting financial services background. So before we dive into anything else, give us a little bit of your background and really kind of how you got involved with FinOps and this whole space.
Sure. So my background is definitely engineering. I started at Goldman Sachs for about 6.5 years, working on the consumer products such as Apple Card. And my FinOps journey really began there, where we were building out, and we get the proverbial call that everyone I'm sure gets that, hey, your non-prod spend is way too high, and figure it out. And tried logging into AWS console, looking at MongoDB Atlas logs, and really just being stuck, right? Not being able to understand, hey, we have multiple different environments and microservices. So how come I can't see the costs in that breakdown? Instead, I just see a bunch of EC2 cost or, EBS volumes and whatever.
Right.
So when I moved over to Citibank about 5 years ago, I was on the core cloud team, and I was focused on the FinOps angle. We called it Cloud Financial Management at the time, but the idea was we wanted to be able to build a platform where our engineers who would be using public cloud didn't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Core components such as observability, SDLC, and FinOps. And there I was really focused on unifying our various different cost data, and then also making sure that our optimization was not just one-off, ad hoc things whenever the CEO or someone said, hey, it's too high, but can we do it more strategically? So that's where I really got involved with the FinOps Foundation as well. I realized that, there's this giant community of people who are really passionate about this and are able to compare notes. So shout out to the FinOps Foundation for really bringing this cultural thing together, even going to FinOps X and meeting practitioners, being able to compare notes and talk through it. Yeah. And then most recently, I joined as field CTO about 3 months ago, where my focus really is on building a platform that isn't just another dashboard, right, with more widgets, more features like dark mode, but really focus on outcomes, on how do we actually move the needle on FinOps practices at corporations where it doesn't feel like it's this thing that we're drowning in too much data, but really focus on the outcomes themselves.
Yeah. I'm curious. I want to dig a little bit into FinOps Foundation, or really just kind of how that originated. It feels like we've had lots of open source communities and boards and other things in which it was a lot of technologists. They were building protocols, they were building architectures. This one feels very much like bringing together of multiple disciplines. I'm curious, how that sort of worked, because obviously, like you said, the technologists are looking at dashboards and EC2 instances and going, okay, those sort of metrics. There's a set of people who live and breathe spreadsheets and financial services. Like how, at least in the early days, like how did that sort of come together? How did even those two languages sort of, coalesce with each other? How has that evolved over time?
Yeah, I think in enterprise, it was definitely a forcing function that you've traditionally had procurement who was in charge of procuring the hardware that had like a 5-year depreciation cycle. And then you had the engineers being told, well, maximize the usage, right? Turning it off is not an option, so you might as well use it. And every time we go into cloud, we flip it, right? We say everything you do, every architectural decision you're making requires you to put thought into it because it is a variable cost going forward. So I think that realization of it's not just an engineering problem, the benefits of a good FinOps practice helps with procurement, understanding what, for example, what EDP or PPA discount to have. Our finance folks to understand, well, what is the run rate for our applications? And if, practice is really strong, be able to do unit economics to help with even things like pricing, right, on any B2B software there. So I think the vested interest that, to me, it's a good FinOps practice really touches almost every part of an organization because there's something in it for everyone. And the data that's, you can glean out of some level of FinOps might be really useful for someone in product or engineering or finance or procurement or anything.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I feel like if I go back a few years and even to the time when you were working in the banks, it feels like as a community, we went through a number of years of cloud where the belief was, the public cloud's cheaper. Look, the prices are coming. They're sort of active in letting us know the prices are coming down. They're telling us it's cheaper. We can do stuff that's experimental. And it made sense for a lot, lots of examples of people saying, hey, I built this thing out of the weekend. It cost me $4. That's amazing. Right. And then, we went through COVID, big run up of putting more stuff in the public cloud. It was sort of, we were in desperate times. And then it felt like right after that, people kind of got smacked in the face, for lack of a better phrase, of, well, wait a second, this stuff is pretty expensive. Like you said, you kind of get hit with that bill. Where do you think we are kind of as an industry in terms of now sort of having some sense of rationalization of like, yes, there are things that make sense in public cloud, there makes sense in your own environment, but kind of from a FinOps perspective or a just financial awareness, do you feel like as an industry we're more aware of that, or are we still kind of in early days of really kind of thinking about what our stuff costs versus how it works?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of times it's this, especially if you're moving from on-prem or traditional, VMs to cloud. Oftentimes the sticker shock is because, like you said, you tried it on the weekend, it's $3,
Yep.
and you go and you build it at a corporation. It's very different.
Right.
And I think the hidden cost of a lot of these things adds up. For example, if you have VPCs that have to be enterprise secure, right? You have to have shared buckets that are actually holding all your logs and everything else there. But I think where we're still struggling as an industry is connecting this data together from cost and usage to making sure that it has a fully loaded context of the business as well.
Yeah.
Right? Oftentimes you look at, I think the biggest fear I find is, it's really hard to tell if you're efficient or not. Right? You spend $1 million and out of context, that's a scary thing. But if you knew that revenue tripled overnight, well, the $1 million is not so bad given that you're making a lot more money.
Right.
Or if your daily active users are now doubling because you're on TechCrunch all of a sudden, well, that context without the cost data without the context is really hard to rationalize.
Right.
And what you're really just looking at is a symptom of, well, what caused this to occur? So I think being able to connect that together and then being able to rationalize, well, the optimization side as well, being able to understand that if you just do a lift and shift and your engineers are used to saying, yeah, I'm just going to put, say, 5 gigs of memory and 2 CPUs for every single one of my microservices. Well, if you do that in the cloud and you really didn't even need that, you're just throwing money away.
Right.
So I think that efficiency angle of really understanding what is the amount of hardware that I actually need for my stuff to run and not over provisioning because, again, if you're on-prem, you never like to worry about it.
Right.
I think that learning curve is where sometimes we often see inefficiencies where then we start thinking about cloud is more expensive.
Right.
Cloud can be cheaper or more expensive depending on your use case, but I'd love for the next 5 years we get away from this mindset of is it cheaper or more expensive and start thinking about, well, what is it enabling our business to do?
Right.
Are we able to launch in a different region or in completely different continent without having to worry about standing up a whole data center? Are we able to start using AI much faster, for example? On and on and on. So those to me are the benefits. And the question is at what cost?
Yeah. No, I think the thing that I've seen is I feel like there's sort of 3 phases that people go through. The first one is, so many people come from what their own experience is. So like you said, they rebuild the same architectures that they knew as for redundancy or just capacity and so forth. So there's that. The second phase is sort of you build something and then the business starts, maybe the bill starts running up, the meter starts running on day one, and you're like, well, but we haven't ramped up marketing. We haven't ramped up, go to market for that. Right. We don't know yet if it's going to be great or if it's not going to be great or if it's too small. And then I think at some point, once you've sort of gone through that, you've lived through it a little bit, like you said, you do start to have some context of, if I stop thinking about this in terms of CPUs or memory or whatever, and I think about it in terms of like, just what's the business context of this, right? Like, are we expanding the business? Are we delivering better customer service? And the things that you think about in terms of metrics or, key points or whatever, it opens you up to a whole new level of conversation within the business that you never thought you were supposed to be part of. But, now that every business decision is a technology decision and sort of vice versa, it brings you into a whole different part of the business, which is, I think, good for people's career. I think it's good for, for how they leverage technology for their company.
Absolutely. I think the trope of you give every engineer a credit card effectively when you go to public cloud. Yeah. It's daunting at first, especially without proper governance and controls around it. But what you're really doing is enabling engineering for the first time, especially in a lot of legacy companies, to not only think of themselves as a cost center, but they're actively driving the bottom line, right? Yep. Their architectural decisions they're making, their ability to actually understand, what I call FinOps moments of when anomalies occur, right? Being able to understand why is that occurring and be able to fix it. Yep. To me, it's going to become more and more critical. The same way we think about engineers are responsible for making sure their application doesn't go down. Yeah. Right, that the application can support n number of users concurrently. Well, it should also be at what cost are those decisions being made? Yeah. And so I think we're getting the engineers the right data and being able to let them actually, similar to like unit testing for code, we should be in a place where engineers feel confident that I had 4 different architectural decisions I could have made, And in my decision tree, cost is one of the things that I could get the data for, and I'm making the right decision for this moment today.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I do want to shift gears a little bit towards the technology because our audience obviously has a kind of a bias towards that. How have you seen the technology around FinOps evolve? Right, how much do you see is still manual and kind of exporting things into spreadsheets? How much of it is I can get these sort of costs from these tools and these from other tools, so they're siloed? Or like in 2025, where do you how would you kind of summarize where we are and where do you think we sort of the next evolution of this is?
Sure. So I've been percolating on this internally at Do It. There's this idea of FinOps in different stages. Mm-hmm. So for me, 1.0 was about a decade ago, and the idea was, hey, let's collate our costs together because right now we have no way of knowing up from down.
Right.
So we aggregate our costs, we have dashboards, we have some optimization insights, but it's really more about, can we see where our cost is going? And we use tagging to be able to attribute costs to different business units or products or whatever. And once we got that handle on that, we started thinking about, are we efficient or not efficient, right? And that's FinOps 2.0 came in, which was all around, hey, let's show you insights and optimizations that might apply to you, might not. We'll give you real-time anomaly detection. So when we see, something going from $1,000 to $10,000, we'll alert you. Yep. And it really, to me, what I call it's endless good ideas, right? There's so much noise coming in. For example, optimizations that in a hub and spoke model of a FinOps practice, you may, surface to your downstream teams and they'll come back and say, this doesn't apply to us. We can't use this type of processor, or we have to use, this version of S3 lifecycle policy or whatever. And so we got kind of stuck in this place where the centralized teams in FinOps know there's something inefficient, right? Because these tools and platforms are telling them, but they're not able to move the needle, right? And similarly, around data, I think engineering has a very different use case for FinOps data than someone in procurement does, or at the C-level do, right? C-level people don't need to see their insights of optimization techniques. They want to know, well, what is the forecast for the rest of the year? Right. And for product or business folks, they want to see, well, what's the ROI for we're delivering this product, but where is the data coming from? So for me, we're still stuck in that. And I think where FinOps 3.0 comes in, which we're trying to index on, is we want to be outcome oriented, right? We don't want to just surface insights that are generic. We don't want to, every time you look at the capabilities in the FinOps Foundation framework, there's more and more. It's almost like if you don't know where to begin, it's very daunting to understand that, hey, in our practice today, we're growing really heavily. We should really focus on getting cost attribution per customer and not necessarily on optimization just yet because we're growing rapidly. Yeah. Or if we're, in a mature state in production, we should really look at, is this the right architecture? And we're a small enough company that we don't actually have to worry about doing chargebacks whatsoever. So understanding what is the thing that a company really requires in that moment and being to help them achieve that outcome, right, is where we're really trying to focus on now. Because otherwise we're going to keep going to FinOps X every year. And in the hallways, everyone's still talking about, my CFO doesn't really get FinOps. They still think I'm doing financial, so they keep sending me invoices, or on and on and on. So how do we move the needle there is, I think, where the next iteration of FinOps is going to be. Yeah.
You mentioned FinOps 3.0. For folks who maybe haven't been keeping up with the evolution of it, can you kind of give us a quick, what's in 3.0, or what's the vision of, what this third iteration might be?
Sure. Yeah. FinOps 3.0 to me is really all about embedding cost intelligence into the engineering practices, so it doesn't become a thing that we look at afterward. Okay. Right? It's about being able to drive the actions that are really needed versus looking at just dashboards. Okay. Right? I think there's always silver bullets every time you go to reInvent or FinOps events, where a lot of vendors will say, "Hey, we have now more features in our platform that can help you do this and that and that." And the proverbial, you log in and you stare at this dashboard, you connect to your AWS and Google data. And I was saying, now what? The engineers still don't have the right relevant data. The business context still isn't loaded. And I still don't know where to move the needle. Should I look at savings plans? Should I focus on tagging? What do I really have to do? So it becomes, for me, 3.0 is all about honing in on what does your company need, right? In that particular moment, and getting that flywheel effect going. So it isn't just, we say crawl, walk, run very easily in FinOps Foundation. But it's really difficult to get that flywheel up and running, to giving the right data to the right people, optimizing when at the right time, and focusing your energies on not this long tail of recommendations or drowning in anomalies, but the things that are actually really, really important, and putting all your energy there.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, it feels like it's essentially what you're sort of saying is it's like anything else that you do. You know, you learn through it, you practice it enough, you build up some muscles, and you want to get to a point where you're doing the thing that you had learned about and trained about, but you're not actively thinking about it. It's there. The muscles are doing it for you. No, it's great to see. And like you said, it's been a 10-year process, but I think, in the context, even in the context of cloud, like that's still pretty rapid, given we're 18 years or so into cloud or at this point and stuff. I want to shift gears a little bit, talk a little bit about Do It. What are some of the things, Do It, as we've talked about, we've had them on the show a number of times. It's been a couple of years. It's good to have you guys back on. What are some of the things from a kind of a FinOps, financial awareness, engineering awareness platform that you guys are doing to make it easier for companies, right? Sort of that thing of, you're not thinking about spreadsheets, you're not thinking about tools, but what are some of the things that you're doing to make it easier? And then what are some of the key focuses that as you talk to companies that are trying to get better at this, trying to bring their organizations together, that you're trying to highlight for them where they're going to get sort of the biggest bang for the buck in terms of where they put resources and time?
Totally. So what we're really focused on is, to me, in FinOps, there's the angle of why are we doing things often so manually, right? Things along anomaly comes up, and you have to now assess it and understand the context of what's actually happening. Is it good or bad? So being able to add the relevant context data, right? So being able to upload the correct business data to be able to now understand this anomaly is not an anomaly because look at their ROI or the revenue being higher. And we're also, so governance is also very important to us, being able to prevent these moments from occurring. So we have things like Cloudflow, where essentially you can create a governance framework that says when this occurs, make sure you can automatically shut it down in a non-prod environment, be able to prevent things from happening, be able to surface it automatically, integrate with Jira. So it isn't this platform that you log into and only stare at on a dashboard, but it's being embedded into your actual life cycle of development. And then on the automation front, we're focused on, one of the things we acquired this year was Perfect Scale. And the idea is Kubernetes optimization is really difficult because oftentimes we focus at the node level, right? We say, hey, this VM that Kubernetes is using is underutilized, so you should, either downsize it or purchase savings plan on top of it. And we realize that the majority of the waste that's happening is at the workload level, right? Engineers are able to log in and say, well, I think 4 gigs of memory and 2 CPUs makes sense. Just apply it. And the realization is every time you create a feature update or merge in a pull request, it might be that your memory footprint actually decreased because it's more efficient or increased. And so with Perfect Scale, we're able to dynamically change your memory and CPU limits based on heuristics, and then also add a layer of buffer in case you're in production environments. So this way, your engineers aren't focused on trying to change these configurations almost like whack-a-mole level, but really can focus then on the actual engineering of their product there. And the last thing we're doing is we realize that, with this entire FinOps practice of never-ending capabilities, not really knowing where to begin, we want to help customers not have to kind of stare at this where do I begin moment. And we have a couple of things we're doing for that. One is Ava, our AI tool, which you can actually just ask in English, right? It's FinOps, AI for FinOps, effectively, where if you need the relevant data at the right time, you shouldn't have to create a dashboard and click into reports and do all the stuff. You should be able to just ask in English, right?
Absolutely.
And the last thing would be for enterprises, we offer a FinOps strategist as well, who really is almost like your partner in understanding, well, what are the outcomes you want to achieve? Is it that you really focus on efficiency and optimization because you see the cloud costs are ballooning? So then we can actually work with you to understand, okay, well, these are the right tools and this is the right way to actually think about it versus kind of being left to your own devices and hoping that, I'd purchase savings plan, but the cost is still going up, or, my teams downstream still have no idea what the actual cost is because they log into AWS to see a number. They log into our platforms, they see a number,
right,
and finance will charge them a completely different number. So you kind of lose trust in that. So really focus on bringing that clarity to our end users as well.
Yeah, no, I like that. It feels very holistic and kind of, given where we are with the maturity of it, it feels like You want tools that are embedded into the things that you work on. You want capabilities that, yes, if you want to dig into the numbers, if you want to kind of dig into it, you can do that. But it surfaces it up at more of a business level. And then, like you said, at some point you go, I'm living in between two worlds. I'm living between the technology world. I'm living between the finance world. I just want to ask it business questions. I just want to ask it.
Right.
I want to speak like a person to this. And I think that's, more than anything, I think that's where we're starting to see really interesting things happen with AI, where people can go, I have some domain expertise, but I want to be able to augment that, and I want to be able to just have an understanding of what's going on. So very cool to see those things happening. I'm going to wrap up and sort of ask one last question and kind of go back to your broader expertise around this. As you're talking to CIOs, CFOs, folks who, ultimately hold fairly large budgets, and you're trying to help them understand, look, like I said, almost every business decision you're making these days has a technology component. So you've got to start to be aware of what the engineers are doing. How do you kind of guide them about how to best think about this, whether it's, educating themselves, whether it's putting the right systems in place, or whether it's, organizationally, like what are the kind of conversations you're having, and how do you guide them given your background and expertise around this?
Yeah, I think the first thing I try to get across is that FinOps doesn't have to be all about, saving money.
Yeah.
I think that being able to shift the mindset to say a good FinOps practice can actually help us make a lot better decisions early on and have confidence in the decisions we're making by looking at the data. And so it becomes a competitive advantage, right? Yeah. You being able to go in, especially with AI now, everyone's spending a gazillion dollars today on AI. And there's this fear of like, what is the ROI? How do I actually see whether it's the right spend or not? Yeah. So being able to flip the conversation from, savings being the ultimate goal to being, business enablement and being time to market faster, and using FinOps data to actually drive those decisions earlier and better, getting them to see that view, I think really unlocks a whole different energy about, how people approach cost. Yeah. And they're not looking at no longer of, oh my God, why is the number going higher? It's like, look at the number in relation to everything else that's happening. Right? And then being able to index on, this is where we have to be more efficient, and this place is more of a playground, and we have to spend money to experiment and everything, but at least we have controls around it, and we're not afraid of getting the call in the middle of the night by your Google rep saying you spent $1 million when you should have spent $1,000. Right. Go take a look at it.
Right. Yeah. No, and I think that's awesome guidance, because I think sometimes far too often we tend to associate FinOps with cost savings or cost visibility. And I think if you talk to like CFO, for example, maybe not the CIO all the time, but the CFO, they're really thinking about capital efficiency, right? Where do I spend dollars to get the most efficiency for the business? And that efficiency could be, better time to market. That could be better, better ways of spending dollars that, like you said, become multiples of 10 or 100 or something like that. So yeah, I think that guidance of understand, how you use technology and the sort of the finance around technology to be an efficient business, as opposed to thinking about it in terms of cost. Just, because like I think you've highlighted this a number of times, the more you're sort of putting the idea that all we're trying to do is reduce cost in the minds of engineers, you're going to get certain outcomes, right? They know how to optimize for those things. And I think if you can bring them into the business conversation, how to grow the business, how to make the business more resilient, whatever that factor is, that becomes really, really important. No, that's fantastic guidance. I'll give you one last question. If folks are wanting to get involved with this, whether it's engaging with your team, engaging with Do It, or really just sort of starting their practice or evolving it, like what are some of the best ways that you find for folks to get started or to engage around your team?
Yeah, I mean, the best way definitely is if you go to our website, you can kind of see what we're doing differently. Mm-hmm. And you can easily book a demo if you need to. But on the FinOps side as well, I think the foundation does a great job of getting practitioners, right? Getting to start thinking about it. Oftentimes, though, I feel like where it falls short, though, is just because you're a practitioner licensed or you pass the test doesn't mean magically you understand everything. But to me, it's like it's okay. right? It's really is a journey, and oftentimes the learnings that occur will never happen just because you pass a test. It'll be because you're in that real life use case and understanding what I can actually do differently now. For at least from Do It perspective, go to our website. You can definitely check out everything we're building there.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much for the time this morning. I know, we've had a number of people who are, curious about not only the technology, but just more importantly, as we're going through this transition between sort of the cloud era extending, the AI era beginning, where do those two things come together? FinOps is right in the middle of that Venn diagram. So it's important to kind of keep up with what's going on here. Thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it, folks. If you're interested, as we've mentioned, we've had a chance to work with the folks that do it for a number of years now. It's great to have Amit over there bringing his expertise there. Go check it out. We put a number of links in the show notes that you can go follow up on. And so with that, I want to thank Amit for his time. I want to thank the folks from Do It for being great partners with us in this. And we'll wrap it up and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.